Okay, welcome to the end of the course. At the end of today, it will be finished. Ta, quiz, and I'm going to give you a practice test to work on during the period and take home with you, and depending if you want to work on the holidays. Um, if you get to know this test, or what's on it, you'll find that it's going to be really easy to get 100 because you can find out your answer before you get there. It's like, do you remember? Oh, how do you do test intervals? Oh, how do you do case 1, case 2 analysis? How do you do a sign chart? Okay? Because they each have their own different way of doing the same result, getting the same result. Okay? So, the first we're going to do is test intervals. Okay, so go to page 544 and write the title here by part 2, write test intervals. So I'm going to show you test intervals and sign chart, and then we're going to do a question in your homework which deals with 4 ways of doing a question, all in one question. So something that would be perfect to have on a study sheet so you can start to tell the differences and similarities between the 4 ways. Okay? Unless they're right beside you or right beside each other on one sheet, you're probably not going to see the differences or the similarities. Now, how do you do test intervals? Okay? Well, I'm going to show you. Now, first of all, like always, we factor it. So I got x squared minus 9x plus 14. That factors to be what? X minus 7, x minus 2. Now, let's get a visual, because when I do the chart, I want you to be able to see the graph. How does that graph look like? So, here's my graph. Where does it go through the x-axis? 2 and 7. Okay. Is this going up or down? Is it smiling or frowning? What is it doing? It's smiling. Okay. Oh, and I want to do it as a dashed line, don't I? Because it is. Now, again, what part of this graph is the solution to this graph? The part above the x-axis or the part below? Why would you say below? It says less than 0. Okay? So this part of the graph is the part that is less than 0. Now, do you see the x's that belong to those points? They would be these, right? Now, that's your answer. Just by looking at the graph, can you describe the answer to me? X has to be greater than 2 and less than 7. Now, that's the answer. This was a multiple choice question. Done. If on the written response I say, show me how to do this question using test intervals, you have no marks yet. Even if you have the answer there, I'm not giving you marks. I want to see the test interval chart and it done. Will I have one of these in the written response on the unit exam? Yes, I will. Okay. Will I have one saying use case 1, case 2, or case analysis, we call that. Okay. And then will I say using a sign chart? Yes, I will. Okay. So if you know how to set each one up, that's probably 75% of the battle. So this is how you set up a test interval. Now we're talking about intervals. Now intervals are, if you were over here, where are you right now? See my little arrow? Here's my graph. How would you define where you are right now? Middle of nowhere? infinity, negative infinity. And you're coming along, and when you get to 2, now do you understand that when you were over here, there was part of a graph. The graph was over there too. Do you see how you get over here, things change? What happens to the graph? It changes from being positive y's to negative y's. Then it goes negative y's to positive y's. And it does that all the way to infinity. So there are 3 intervals here. From negative infinity to 2, 2 to 7, and 2 to infinity. Or sorry, 7 to infinity. Those are my 3 different intervals. Okay? So, what are my intervals? They are when x is less than 2, when x is greater than 2 and less than 7, and when x is greater than 7. Okay? Then you just do your chart like this, okay? And what you're going to write here is your actual equation. X squared minus 9x plus 14. I actually like it the factored way, and you'll see why. X minus 7, x minus 2. Because with the factored way, I can do the math in my head a lot easier. Now, since these are intervals, and we're doing test intervals, we're going to test the number in this interval and see what kind of answer it gives me. When x is less than 2, can you give me a number that would be great to work with? 1, even a better one. 0. If you can use 0, use it. So we're going to test 0. So what you do is you take 0 and you put it into where x is. Now, that would be 0 minus 7 is negative 7. Negative 7 times negative 2 is positive or negative? So we're going to write positive there. Okay? Now, give me an interval, or a number in the interval between 2 and 7. Okay? 5. So let's put 5 in there. 5 minus 7 is negative 2. You can even do that. Go. So it'd be negative 2 times 5 minus 2 is 3. What's negative 2 times 3? It's negative, isn't it? So, now, let's do the third test interval. X is greater than 7. So we're going to use 10. 10 minus 7 is 3. And 10 minus 2 is 8. 3 times 8 is positive. Now, look at the original question. It says, when is this graph? What's the word? What's the word? Negative. When is this graph negative? Look here. In this interval. Does everyone see this? So therefore, I know we know what the graph looks like already, but pretend we haven't seen that graph. Just from the chart, I would know that it is in this interval. Okay? So, what are 2 and 7? We call them critical points. Why are they critical? Well, think of the word. Anything that is critical in the case, that means it's really, really significant. It's really important. Why are 2 and 7 important here? Because things change. The graph changes. It goes from being positive to negative to positive because of those points. So they are the 3 intervals we check. From negative infinity to the first number. Between the 2 numbers and then the last number to positive infinity. That's how you do a test interval chart. Okay? Do you get it? It's pretty simple, but how are you going to remember how to do the setup, right? Okay, now, next way to do these are called sign charts. Now, these are a little bit more in-depth. So let's do, if I had x squared plus 2x right here is minus 8 is greater than 0. Now, if we factor that, we would get x plus 4, x minus 2 is greater than 0. That's the factored. And determine the zeros, well, they're negative 4 and 2. Now, those are very critical points. Now, this is how the sign chart works. It puts the points negative 4 and 2 there, but it actually gives a separate section to the other parts. Now, do you see how we have covered the entire gamut going from left to right? Do you see how we have, here we have everything less than negative 4. Then we get to negative 4. Then we have everything between negative 4 and 2. Then we get to 2. And then we get to everything to the right. So if I was to describe this on a number line, here is negative 4. Here is 2. This was the first one. This is the second one. This is the third one, fourth, and fifth. It will always have 5 different sections on the graph. So you see how it's kind of like the one before, except the one before would take negative 4 and everything less than it in one thing. Now, you put those numbers in the chart, and then you take your two factors, x plus 4 and x minus 2, and I put them on the side, and then I do product. Now, how do you think they got these signs here? Negative, negative, positive. Okay? Well, I'll show you. What does this mean? Anything to the left of negative 4. Give me something. Negative 5. Okay? Now, what happens if you put negative 5 into here? What do you get? You get negative 1. See how you get a negative sign? What happens if you put negative 5 into here? You get a negative. How does it get a positive here? They multiply. Negative times a negative equals a positive. Okay? Now, the next one, you actually take the point negative 4 and put it in. Well, that's going to give you 0, obviously. Negative 4, negative 2 is negative 6. That's negative. 0 times negative is 0. Okay? Now, anything between negative 4 and 2, what's a good point? 0. Okay? Take 0, put it in. 0 plus 4 is positive. Yeah? 0 minus 2 is negative. Negative 2, right? So you can see how, and a positive times a negative equals a negative. You put in 2. 2 plus 4 is positive. 2 minus 2 is 0. Positive times a 0 is a 0. Now, anything to the right of 2? 3. 36. Okay, good one. 3 plus 4, 7. That's positive. 3 minus 2 is positive, so you can see positive. So what is this saying? This is saying this is when the graph is above the x-axis. This is when it hits the x-axis. This is when it's below the x-axis. This is when it hits the x-axis coming back up. Positive means above, okay? So this means above, below, above. I mean, think of a thermometer if you really want. When it's positive, it is above 0. When it's negative, it's below. So, my graph would show above, and I'm doing, so I would show above, below, right? And then it comes back, and then above again. And the question said, when is this above? So that would be this point here and this point here. Or as you can see the arrows, so when x is less than negative 4 and when x is greater than 3. 2, I should say. Sorry. There's your sign chart. A little bit more in depth. Okay? Now, I want to do one more because this one is a little bit more difficult because we have to factor it. Now, how would you factor this? What did I say always do first? Take out a common factor. What can come out all of them? Okay, actually take a negative 3 and then you're left with a nice positive. So 2x squared minus 13 plus 13x plus 6. Okay, and just to speed things up, I'll factor this for you. X plus 6, 2x plus 1. So, negative 6 and negative 1/2 are critical points, right? So when you do your chart, put negative 6, negative 1/2, and put like this. Now, on the sides, we always put we need to put this in there. So you'll have 3 sections, negative 3, x plus 6, and 2x plus 1. Now with the negative 3, you can't really put something in. So this one will be negative all the way along. And you'll see why that is a factor, because obviously your product's different if you're doing negative times positive. Now then you pick, now I could tell you already, we could do the math like crazy, but I tell you there's going to be a 0 here, because when you plug in the negative 6, and there will be a 0 here. Okay, there always will be, because when I put in negative 1/2, like that one would be 0 there, this one's going to be 0 here, no matter what the other signs are, right? So let's start on the left. Give me a point less than negative 6. Negative 10. Okay? So negative 10 plus 6 is negative. 2 times negative 10 plus 1, negative. So what's a negative times a negative times a negative? It's negative. Okay? What's the number between negative 6 and negative 1/2? See, it's getting you thinking, right? This, even the intervals is a challenge for some people. They're like, oh, I don't know what's in between those two. Give me some. I got to test it. Negative 3. Okay? So negative 3 plus 6, that's positive. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6 plus 1. That's negative. So a negative times a positive times a negative is positive. Last one. Give me an interval greater than negative 1/2. 0. Or test, I should say. 0 plus 6 is 6, which is a positive. And 2 times 0 plus 1 is a positive. So a negative times a positive is a negative. Now, this is asking me for when is it less than or equal to 0? Less than or equal to 0 would be here and here, correct? No, well, that's going to be my interval, right? So when x is less than or equal to negative 6, and when x is greater or equal to negative a half. And if you were to graph this, you see it goes like this, and we're looking for, right, when is it negative? And it's these. Okay, so that supports it. Because here's negative 6, and this is x is less than negative 6, right? Negative 7, negative 8, negative 9. And you can even test any of those intervals in there, they will work. Okay, so now let's all wrap it together. Let's go to question 6. This is actually part of your homework, so we're doing your homework right now. Now, I love this question because if I was making a study sheet, I would have this question on that study sheet, and I would do the entire question. Why? Ask me for case analysis, do the same question again using test intervals, do the same question again using sign analysis with a sign chart, and then do it again graphically. So all four of them should have the same exact answer. It's how you get to that answer. Now I know what you're saying. You're like, well, like why can't I just do it graphically? Hey, if it was multiple choice, go for it. But I need you to know how to do these because this is very prominent in calculus. And you're thinking, well, calculus, like even if I take Math 31, that's like over a year away. No, you need to be introduced in how to do sign analysis. And it actually, you always have to be thinking, well, what should be my test point in that interval? It is definitely creating different neural pathways than graphing is. Okay? So, let's just factor this first. What does it factor out to be? What are my numbers? Add to 12 multiplied to negative 28. X plus 14, x minus 2. So let's cheat and go right to graphically. Okay, so let's put our points down. We have negative 14 and positive 2. Now, is this smiling or frowning? Smiling. So and is it solid or is it dashed? So it's dashed, and it's going like this, right? What part of the graph am I going to be shading in? Top or bottom? Above 0, right? Why did I pick that? Because I have some people giving me dirty looks right now. Because the equation says, when is it above 0? That's what greater than 0 means, you guys. Above. Okay? Now, do you see the x's that accompany that graph? Will be here, right? Pick any point on here, I guarantee the x value will be less than negative 14. And these. So how would you describe what I shaded in? When x is less than negative 14 and when x is greater than 2. Does that make sense? Should be like that's what today's quiz was on. Now, let's do another part of today's quiz, which was the case analysis. Now, case analysis, above 0, that means positive, right? So there's case 1. We've got a positive times a positive equals a positive, and case 2, a negative times a negative equals a positive. So we're going to go x plus 14 is greater than 0. X minus 2 is greater than 0. X plus 14 minus 14. X would have to be greater than negative 14. Add 2, x has to be greater than 2. Now you want to pick test intervals because you don't know D yet. You haven't graphed it, right? And that's why they did D last, because they didn't want you to actually know the answer before you start. But you pick numbers like less than negative 14. We'll pick negative 15. If you put negative 15 into your original equation, so negative 15, negative 15 plus 14 is negative 1. Put negative 15 in there. Negative 15 minus 2 is negative 17. Negative 1 times negative 17, is that positive? Yes. So this one is working for me. And it shouldn't be. Oh, crap. You know why? This shouldn't be the right answer. Why? Look at what number I picked. X is greater than negative 14. I picked negative 15. Is that a number greater than? No. That's a number less than. So I should have picked like negative 10. Okay? So negative 10 plus 14 is 4. Negative 10 minus 2 is negative 12. 4 times negative 12, that's a negative. So this one doesn't work. Now I told you, when you do these, if they're both going right, take the bigger right one. Right? So it still works, but I do want to see you testing intervals. Now x is greater than 2. Give me a number greater than 2. Well, let's pick 3. Okay, and you put in a 3. 3 plus 14 is 17. 3 minus 2 is 1. 17 times 1 is positive. So this does work. Okay, I got the 1. Now look below. Oh yeah, that one does work. Okay, now let's do my negative times a negative. So x plus 14 is less than 0, and x minus 2 is less than 0. So x is less than negative 14. X is less than 2. Now again, pick good test intervals. Less than 14, well, negative 15. Plug negative 15 in here, okay? So negative 15 plus 14 is negative 1. Negative 15 minus 2, negative 17. Negative 1 times negative 17. That's positive, right? So this one does work. And if you try a number less than 1, like 0, you will get a negative number. So you'll see this doesn't work. So this gives the answer when x is less than negative 14, when x is greater than 2. I had a student in the last class that's like, didn't understand until I went over it a second time with just that person. And she said, oh, you just did the same question 4 times. I said, yep, 4 different ways. Okay, because you have to know how to do each way. Now, let's do it using the 2 new charts that we got. Okay, so we start with interval. Interval is when x is less than negative 14. When it's between negative 14 and 2, and when x is greater than 2. You see how I've covered the entire gamut? If you were going from left to right on the number line. Okay, and then we put x plus 14 and x minus 2. So pick a number. Minus, minus, excuse me here. Okay, what's the number? Sorry. Okay, what's the number less than 14? Give me one. Try negative 15, right? Okay, put it in. You would get a negative 1 and a positive. No, negative, negative. So you would get a positive here. Test the number between negative 14 and 2. Use 0. Okay, so if you put in 0 here, 0 plus 14 is 14. 0 minus 2, that's negative 2. Right, 14 times, so you get a negative. Anything greater than 2, try 3. 3 plus 14 is 17. 3 minus 2 is 1, so that's a positive. Okay, it says, when is this thing positive, right? Look at my original question. Ask, when is it positive? Well, there you go. It's positive when x is less than negative 14 and x is greater than 2. Hopefully I'm getting the same answer 4 times. I've done something wrong. Okay, one more time. Sign chart. This is how it works. You got your x, right? And you go like this. You're going left when it is negative 14. When it's in between the two. When it is 2 and when it's to the right. And you put x plus 14, x minus 2. And you're going to multiply those two together to get the product. You can see why this is such a good question that you have to put this in your study sheet. So I'm going to test negative 15 here. So negative 50, that'll give you a negative. That's a negative. So negative times a negative equals positive. Okay, when it is negative 14, you can always guarantee it's going to be 0. When it's in between, so I'm going to pick 0. 0 plus 14, that's positive. 0 minus 2 is negative. Positive times a negative is a negative. When it is 2, it's going to be 0. What's greater than 2? Try 3. 3 plus 14, that's a positive. 3 minus 2 is a positive. Gives me a positive. Okay, again, what did the question ask? When is this graph positive? It's there. When x is less than negative 14, or when x is greater than 2. So there is the last 2 lessons summed up in one question. Okay? So it is 4 different ways to do the same question. So for homework, you're just doing 1 to 6, which is actually 1 to 5, because I did 6 for you, with you. Okay, get right at it.